Have you ever shared an exciting plan with someone and felt something changed after that, as if the energy around that dream had been sucked out by the conversation? Have you shared a blessing with close people and noticed the relationship dynamic became different, heavier, without being able to explain exactly why? Have you exposed a weakness in a moment of vulnerability and later regretted putting that information out in the world? These experiences aren't paranoia. They're your spirit recognizing something your mind hasn't named yet, that your words open doors, and not every open door invites what you want to enter. Contemporary Christian culture has overvalued total transparency as a sign of spiritual maturity, as if keeping something in silence were equivalent to living in hypocrisy. But this equation is wrong, and the consequences of believing it are costing aborted dreams, sabotaged blessings, interrupted healing processes, and divine revelations contaminated by environments lacking capacity to receive them. Strategic silence isn't lack of faith. It's one of the most sophisticated forms of spiritual discernment existing, and the Bible has much more to say about it than any sermon on transparency. What you're about to discover will change how you use your words, with whom you share what God is doing in you, and how you protect what was entrusted to you for a purpose still in process. This isn't a message to make you closed or distrustful of people. It's a message to make you wise, protected, and capable of reaching the destination God prepared with what He deposited in you intact. Stay until the end, because one of the 7 points we'll explore will name something that happened in your life you never could quite explain. Joseph was 17 when he received 2 dreams revealing his future in a way even he couldn't fully process. And the first thing he did was tell everyone. The result was predictable. His brothers hated him even more, plotted to kill him, and sold him as a slave. The vision was genuine. The calling was real. The purpose was from God. But the word given at the wrong time, to the wrong people, opened spiritual doors costing years of suffering. Joseph reached the right destination, but the path was much longer and more painful than it needed to be. The visions God gives are for private preparation before public declaration. They arrive in secret because they first need to do internal work, creating capacity to bear the weight of what will manifest externally. When you tell the next step God placed in your heart before it's ready to be revealed, you're not being inspiring, you're being imprudent. Spiritual discernment begins exactly here, knowing not every revelation was given to be shared, and that silence about what God showed is protection, not lack of faith. Words have spiritual weight. They're not just social communication, they're declarations opening or closing dimensions. When you speak about what God is doing in you before it's protected, mature, and positioned, you're placing in public space something still in private formation process. And not all people hearing your visions have discernment to receive them, maturity to celebrate them without envy, or spiritual alignment to not inadvertently cast on them the weight of their own limitations and doubts. The practice of silence about the next step isn't paralysis, it's stewardship. You're caring for what was entrusted to you with the responsibility of someone understanding the God-given dream has a right time to be revealed. Write it down, pray, prepare, build in silence, and let public revelation happen at the moment God, not your anxiety to be understood, determines its time. And speaking of things God whispers in secret, there's a specific category of divine revelation losing something essential when exposed to the wrong environment. There's a specific intimacy developing between a person and God in moments of deep silence. Those revelations arriving in the early morning. Those words you felt in your heart during prayer time going beyond the common. Those promises God spoke about you in such a personal way it seemed like a private conversation between the two. This type of revelation has a different quality from everything you read in the Bible or hear in a sermon. It carries the fingerprint of your specific story, your specific calling, and the specific moment God chose to speak. And this quality dilutes when exposed to the wrong environment. Mary, mother of Jesus, is a perfect model of how to guard what God whispers. Luke records she treasured all these things and pondered them in her heart. Not because she was shy or because the revelations weren't real, but because there was wisdom in her recognizing not every environment was prepared to receive what had been deposited in her. She didn't go to the market announcing she was pregnant with God's son. She went to visit Elizabeth, who had spiritual discernment to receive that revelation without distorting it. The secret God entrusted to you deserves the same care. The problem of revealing everything God told you in secret isn't just spiritual. It's also emotional and psychological. When you share a profound revelation with someone lacking capacity to receive it, you inevitably receive back skepticism, distorted interpretations, or enthusiasm lacking depth sufficient to sustain the weight of what was revealed. And this inadequate return can contaminate how you yourself see the revelation, creating weakness where there was certainty, confusion where there was clarity, and doubt where there was faith. Protection of what God whispered in secret begins with a simple question before sharing any profound revelation. Does this person have spiritual capacity to carry what I'm about to place in them? It's not arrogance, it's discernment. You don't share the same level of depth with everyone, the same way a doctor doesn't discuss a patient's diagnosis in a circle of friends. Silence about what is sacred isn't hiding, it's honoring. And there's a category of action seeming completely pious, but losing its reward the moment it's announced. Jesus was surprisingly direct about this subject, and his directness about something seeming harmless reveals how much this matters at the spiritual level. Matthew 6 verse 1 says clearly, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." It's not suggestion, not Jesus' personal preference for discreet people. It's instruction with direct consequence. Whoever seeks human recognition for what they did receives exactly that, and only that. Human applause is the reward, and it's all you'll receive. There's a subtle trap especially affecting people of genuine faith and generous heart. The need for sacrifice to be recognized, for effort to be validated, and for surrender to be celebrated by someone who can confirm it was worth it. This need isn't necessarily superficial vanity. Often it's the wounded heart of someone who gave much and received little recognition during life. But when you tell your good works to supply this need, you're trading a permanent heavenly reward for temporary human validation. And this is one of the worst spiritual deals existing. Stewardship of good works includes keeping in silence what was done in secret, not because sacrifice has no value, but because real value is in the reward coming from the one who saw what no one else saw. Jesus said the Father, who sees in secret, will reward in public, but order matters. First silence, then reward. First work done without audience, then celebration God organizes at right time. Inverting this order doesn't accelerate reward, it substitutes it with something infinitely smaller. The concrete practice here is creating deliberate space of silence about what you do, especially when temptation to tell is greatest, which is usually when sacrifice was most significant. Do it, pray, surrender to God, and resist the impulse to record, share, or mention. Over time, this silence will become natural, and you'll start noticing blessings arriving after works done in secret have a different quality from those arriving after announced works. And speaking of things needing protection, there's something even more delicate than good works, something that, when exposed before time, gives the enemy exactly what he needs. There's a fundamental difference between testimony and wound, and this difference is the time, the process, and the healing happening between the two. A testimony is what you tell after having crossed through, after having been healed, after having found the meaning of what happened, and after being standing on the other side with stability sufficient to carry the story without being carried by it. A wound is what you expose when still in the middle of process, still bleeding, still without the perspective only complete healing offers. And exposing a wound before healing isn't courageous vulnerability. It's unnecessary risk with real consequences. The enemy has a very specific strategy for dealing with those in healing process. He uses the very people around to introduce into the open wounds environment elements contaminating the process, not necessarily from bad intention of those listening, but because weakness exposed prematurely attracts responses ranging from over-identification of those with the same wound to veiled judgment of those not understanding the process, passing through pity of those treating you as irrecoverable case. None of these responses helps healing. All of them, in different ways, complicate the process. Discernment to know the difference between wound and testimony begins with honest question. When I tell this, am I seeking healing through exposure, or am I sharing healing that already happened? If you still need the listener's reaction to process what happened, the wound is still open, and the environment for open wound healing is silence with God, not stage with audience. Protection of your weakness during healing process isn't hiding truth. It's honoring sacred time. Healing needs to be complete. This doesn't mean never being vulnerable or never sharing difficulties. It means having discernment to choose with whom, when, and how much to share according to the healing level already happened. Find 1 or 2 trusted mentors or counselors to process what's still ongoing, and reserve public testimony for what's already been crossed with victory. Weakness exposed at wrong time gives ammunition. Healed weakness shared at right time gives hope. And there's still an area of your life seeming completely safe to share, but carrying spiritual risks very few people are willing to admit. There's a comfortable illusion accompanying blessing seasons, that everyone around you is as happy about what you received as you are. And this illusion, fed by genuine kindness of those loving people and wanting to believe it's reciprocated, can transform your blessing into target in a way you never saw coming. Not everyone's celebrating with you in your presence roots for you in your absence. And this isn't cynical statement about human nature. It's biblical observation about human heart reality. Not even the most mature believer is immune from feeling. Hezekiah's story in 2 Kings 20 is direct warning about this theme. He received death diagnosis, prayed, was healed, and received 15 additional years of life as sign of divine protection. Then ambassadors from Babylon arrived, and Hezekiah showed them everything: treasures, spices, gold, silver, weapons, absolutely everything in his palace. Prophet Isaiah was direct. Everything you showed will be taken to Babylon. The same palace protected by God was emptied because the king, instead of keeping in silence what he possessed, gave complete tour to those who shouldn't know what was inside. Discernment about what to share of your blessings isn't ingratitude or reverse ostentation. It's stewardship of what was entrusted to you. You can be grateful to God publicly without detailing the size of what you received. You can testify to God's faithfulness without making complete inventory of blessings for those lacking the same level of spiritual maturity to celebrate without feeling comparison's weight. Protection of your blessings begins in your own mouth, and strategic silence about what you have is part of caring for what God gave you. The concrete practice here is developing the habit of thanking God privately with the same intensity you share publicly, and letting public celebration be proportional to the trust level and spiritual discernment of those present. It's not hiding God's grace. It's protecting the fruits it produced from environments lacking capacity to receive them without envy, jealousy, or comparison contaminating space. And speaking of protection of what was entrusted, there's a broader spiritual principle sustaining all these practices, and it completely changes how you understand silence's role in your walk. The word stewardship carries weight going far beyond financial management. It describes the responsibility to care well for everything entrusted to you by someone with greater authority. And when God entrusts you with a vision, revelation, blessing, or healing process, He's doing exactly that, depositing in you something having eternal value, and needing to be administered with the same care you'd give anything precious and fragile. Silence isn't passivity. It's the active act of protecting what was deposited from environments lacking capacity to receive it without damage. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 7 speaks of a time to be silent and a time to speak, and this alternation isn't random or culturally determined. There are moments when silence is the only spiritually correct response, not because there's nothing to say, but because what there is to say isn't yet at the right time to be said. Discernment between these two times is one of the most sophisticated forms of spiritual maturity, and most people never fully develop it because they live in a culture rewarding those who speak more, share more, and reveal more, regardless of these revelations' spiritual weight. Keeping secrets God entrusted to you isn't the same as keeping secrets harming other people. It's a completely different category having to do with protecting the sacred. When Jesus healed people, he frequently instructed, "Don't tell anyone." Not because healing wasn't real or because he was ashamed of what he'd done, but because there was divine timing for revelation. Premature publicity would have compromised. The same principle applies to what God is doing in you now. There's a time to reveal that isn't your time of anxiety, but God's time of purpose. Silence as spiritual stewardship is practiced intentionally, doesn't arrive naturally in a culture valuing total transparency as supreme virtue. Begin with small practices. Before sharing something God showed you, wait at least a week and pray about whether to share, with whom, and how much. Before telling a blessing, ask if the environment has discernment to receive it without distortion. Before exposing weakness, ask if healing is already complete enough to transform pain into testimony. And as you develop this practice, you'll notice strategic silence doesn't impoverish your spiritual life. It multiplies what was kept in a way premature sharing never would allow. There's a strategic advantage few believers consciously explore, and that Jesus himself used consistently throughout his entire ministry. He moved in silence before acting publicly, withdrew before advancing, protected information about what he was doing until the right moment arrived. When he raised Lazarus, he didn't announce beforehand what he would do. He arrived, acted, and the result spoke for itself. When he entered Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, he hadn't communicated the script to anyone who could sabotage it. Strategic silence wasn't timidity. It was wisdom of one knowing the enemy can't attack what he doesn't know. Moving in silence doesn't mean living in absolute secrecy or building a life of paranoid isolation. It means having discernment about what to reveal, when to reveal, and to whom to reveal in each phase of process. There's huge difference between silence of fear, which paralyzes, and silence of protection, which positions. The first comes from insecurity of those not wanting to be seen because they fear being judged. The second comes from confidence of those knowing what's being built in secret has more value than any premature public validation could offer. The enemy works with information. He uses what he knows about you, about your plans, and about your weaknesses to build sabotage strategies arriving through people, circumstances, and thoughts. When you protect your dreams, revelations, and blessings with correct silence, you remove from the equation a significant amount of material that could be used against your purpose's advancement. It's not spiritual paranoia. It's wisdom of those understanding spiritual battle is real. Information has weight in this battle, and stewardship of what you speak is as important as stewardship of what you do. The practice of moving in silence begins with a simple and powerful decision, letting results speak before intentions. Build, prepare, advance, and let what God is doing in you reveal itself through fruit, not through announcement. The right people will recognize what was built in silence when revelation time arrives, and this recognition will have a quality premature announcement never would have produced. The silence protecting process is the same amplifying result, and this is the most powerful principle this entire message wanted to transmit. We've reached the end of this message. But the truth is the most important work begins now. Next time you're about to tell something God showed you, reveal a blessing still needing protection, or expose weakness still in healing process. So before closing this video, let me ask you some questions deserving honest answer. Is there something you recently shared that should have been kept in silence? And did you notice consequences after? Which dreams, revelations, or blessings in your life need protection right now, before the next impulse to share arrives? And what changes in the quality of what God is building in you when you decide to move in silence until He Himself determines revelation time? You learn to never tell your next step before it's protected and mature, because wrong words in wrong hands open dangerous spiritual doors. You learn some divine revelations lose purity when exposed to wrong environment, and keeping what God whispered honors the intimacy He created with you. You learn seeking human recognition for your good works trades heavenly reward for temporary applause, and the Father who sees in secret rewards in public at right time. You learn there's difference between testimony and wound, and exposing pain before healing gives ammunition to enemy instead of hope to listener. You learned not everyone celebrating with you roots for you, and stewardship of your blessings begins in your own mouth. You learn silence is spiritual stewardship, protection of sacred and space for multiplication. And you learned moving in silence isn't timidity or paranoia, but wisdom of those understanding the enemy can't attack what he doesn't know. Don't let this message be just another interesting content passing through your screen without leaving real decision. Choose today a concrete action. Identify something God showed you needing to be kept in silence a while longer. Pray asking discernment about what to reveal and what to protect, or simply decide next time the impulse to share arrives. You'll pause and first ask if it's the right time. The silence protecting process is the same amplifying result, and the result God is preparing for you deserves to arrive intact. If this message touched something you can't ignore, help me take it to more people. Subscribe to the channel, activate notification bells to not miss any content, and tell me here in comments what city you're watching this video from. I want to know where this word is reaching, because each person learning to protect what God deposited in them and advancing in silence until right time matters. May God give you discernment to keep what is sacred, wisdom to reveal at right time, and peace of knowing strategic silence is one of the most powerful forms of faith existing.